Hey everyone, I'm Simon, and this story happened to me when I was 25 years old. Back then, I was working in an office at a company that manufactured cars. I worked in the sales department, which meant I spent most of my time stuck in a stuffy office, sitting in front of a computer. I had a few co-workers nearby, but we weren't really friends, more like just people who worked next to each other. That day, we had a lot on our plates. My workday usually started at 8 a.m. and ended around 6 p.m., but this particular day was different. It was the last workday of the month, and I had to stay late. Really late. There were 4 of us left in the office that evening. We had to prepare a quarterly report, and each of us had a specific task. Unfortunately, I drew the short straw. I had way more work than the others, and none of it could be pushed to the next day. By the time I looked at the clock again, it was already 9 p.m. Everyone else had gone home except for me and John. We were sitting a few meters apart, and we were never close. Not friends, just co-workers. But that night, we were united by one thing. We both hated our jobs and were completely exhausted. I made myself some coffee, and not long after, I needed to use the restroom. I stepped into the hallway, thinking only about how badly I wanted to go home. I was done with that day. The office felt more like a prison than a workplace at that point. I walked down the dark hallway in that big, empty building, realizing I was basically alone. Well, except for John. I used the bathroom and splashed some cold water on my face, knowing I still had at least 2 more hours of work ahead of me. As I stepped back into the hallway, I looked toward our office. There was a light at the end of the corridor, and someone was standing there. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, and the figure was gone. What the hell was that? Was I hallucinating? Or was it John? I walked back into the office and looked toward John's desk. He was still sitting there, right where he'd been. I didn't say anything. I just sat back down at my desk and got back to work. By 10 p.m., I could barely sit upright at my desk. My back hurt, my neck was stiff, and I had a pounding headache. I stood up and went to the office kitchen to make another coffee. Before I left, I asked John if he wanted some. He shook his head slightly, making it clear he didn't want to be disturbed. I brewed a strong cup and headed back to my workstation. But when I got back, I immediately noticed something. John was gone. Lucky him, I thought. Must have finished all his tasks and gone home. I still had a lot left to do. I finished my coffee and tried to refocus on work, but something kept nagging at me. John had left his computer on. His monitor was the only one still lit up besides mine. That struck me as odd. I kept working for a bit, but my eyes kept drifting toward his screen. I don't know if it was just curiosity or if I was too tired to concentrate, but eventually, I got up to check it out. As I was walking over, I heard a loud crash coming from the hallway to my right. I froze and turned toward the sound, but saw nothing. It was pitch black out there. No way anyone could be wandering around. I brushed it off and approached John's desk. His screen was still on, and when I looked at it, I saw a report open, but it wasn't finished. Weird. So he hadn't left? Maybe he just went to the bathroom, but it had been at least 30 minutes since I last saw him. I went back to my desk, telling myself to stop getting distracted and just finish the damn report. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Where the hell did John go? I tried to work, but then I heard another crash, louder this time, again from the hallway. I lifted my head and stared down that dark corridor, and I think I saw someone. Maybe it was John. Something pulled me toward that darkness. I stood up and walked into the hall, calling out softly, "Is anyone there?" I didn't expect a response, but then I heard a voice.
"Go back,"
it said quietly, a low, calm voice coming from the far end of the hallway. I couldn't see who it was. I didn't answer. Honestly, I was tense as hell, frozen in place. This was the first time I'd ever felt anything like this. This creepy. I just stood there, still, silent. And then I heard footsteps. Someone was walking toward me. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. I wanted to turn and run, but for some reason I didn't move. I just stood there like an idiot. Then, just as I was about to snap from the tension, a figure appeared.
"I told you to go back,"
he said. It was John. He scared the crap out of me. I asked, "What the hell are you doing?" John whispered back, "Keep your voice down." "What's going on?" I asked. He turned slightly but didn't answer. I asked him again what he was doing and who he was hiding from. What the hell was going on with him? Had he snapped from the stress? He turned to me again and said, "He can't see us." And then John ran into the darkness. What the hell? At that point, I stopped feeling scared. I just didn't understand what was happening to this guy. I decided to follow him to make sure he didn't hurt himself or something. I walked down the dark hallway, but I didn't see him anywhere. Where did he go? I made it to the elevators, and just then, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I nearly had a heart attack. It was John. "What the hell are you doing?" I snapped. I was losing it. His hide-and-seek game was getting on my nerves. "Keep your voice down," he said. At that moment, the elevator came to life. It was heading up. "He's coming," John whispered, then took off running again. Great. Probably the security guard coming to check what was going on. I stood there, wondering how John had completely lost his mind. 3 floors left. 2. 1. The doors opened. No one was inside. What? Someone had called the elevator from downstairs and sent it up. The doors closed, and that's when the dread returned, like I was trapped in some kind of nightmare. I went back to the office. Everything around me felt unreal. I sat down at my desk and looked at my monitor. My report was gone. Not a single word on the screen. Did someone erase it, or was I losing my mind too? I turned to look at John's desk, and as I turned, I accidentally knocked over my mug, and it shattered. That's when I heard footsteps. It was John, walking calmly back to his desk like nothing had happened. I looked at my monitor again, and the report was back, just like before. I asked John where he had been, and what the hell had happened in the hallway. He looked at me and said he had no idea what I was talking about. "I just went to the restroom," he said. "Dude, I was only gone a couple minutes." But it had been an hour. I looked at the clock. It was exactly 11 p.m. I could have sworn it was well past midnight. I sat there for another 10 minutes, trying to pull myself together. Maybe I fell asleep. Maybe I dreamed the whole thing. That was the most logical explanation. But the scariest part of it all was when I finally got downstairs and saw the security guard. He was staring at me, with eyes full of fear, like he knew exactly what really happened. Was it really just a dream? Hi everyone. This isn't your typical story. There's no introduction. Anna didn't talk about who she was or what her life was like. She only shared the most important parts. I was running through the forest late at night. A man was chasing me, someone who wouldn't have let me get away alive if he hadn't been distracted 5 minutes earlier by a deer darting across the road. I had jumped out of a moving car, badly injuring myself, but I managed to get up and run into the woods. I knew he would follow me. He couldn't let me escape. My arms, legs, even my face were covered in cuts and scrapes. I ran through the forest, hoping to find another road, and eventually, I did. I came out of the trees and saw a road ahead, and not far from it, there was a flower shop. A small, 24-hour flower shop, the only building around with its lights on. I headed straight for it. When I walked in, the cashier immediately reached for her phone. I told her I wasn't a robber. I just needed help. I was sure he was still chasing me. I gave a quick explanation that someone was trying to kill me and we didn't have much time. The woman asked if the man was armed and I told her he had a gun. There was a panic button in the building, but it wasn't working. She said she'd call the police, but first we had to hide and turn off the lights. She flipped the main switch and we hid behind the counter. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. I kept peeking out from under the counter, watching the street. The shop was nearly all glass, lots of windows. And then I saw him. He stepped out of the forest with a flashlight in his hand. I prayed he wouldn't come this way. He just stood there, slowly turning his head from right to left. And then, he looked straight at the flower shop. I doubt he could see me, but the moment he took his first step toward us, my heart sank with fear. I knew that if he came here, we were done. I whispered to the woman, telling her he'd found us. He walked right up to the building, and the worst part was, I knew the glass door wouldn't stop him. I could hear him moving slowly around the outside of the shop, probably trying to see inside. We sat silently on the floor, barely breathing. He wasn't completely sure I was inside, but then he came back to the entrance, stood there, and said,
"I know you're in there, and if I come in and find you, you'll be begging me to kill you quickly."
I was shaking with fear. The cashier covered my mouth with her hand. He was bluffing. He said if I came out on my own, he'd leave the woman alone. I was terrified she might give me up to save herself. I wouldn't have blamed her. But she didn't move. She kept her hands over my mouth. Then I heard him step forward.
"I warned you."
And at that moment, we heard the sirens. The police had arrived. He spotted the cops and took off into the forest, disappearing in the direction he'd come from. I broke down, crying uncontrollably, and thanked the woman who had just saved my life. She hadn't given me up. She'd risked herself to protect me. I told the police everything, but what happened that night will live only in my memory. I'll just say this: don't trust bad people, and be grateful to those who help you. I was foolish, and I'll never go back to the life I had before. My name is Jack. My job requires me to walk 30 kilometers during each work shift. I visit service points for our company's clients, take photos for reports, and collect important documents. I won't go into detail about what exactly our organization does, but I was fine with the job. I enjoy walking. It's good for your health. It was just a normal work day, nothing out of the ordinary. Things only started to change when I went on my lunch break. I went to McDonald's and ordered a combo meal. I sat down at a table and waited. I get exactly 1 hour for lunch. 20 minutes passed and my food still hadn't arrived. I waited a little longer, then went up to the counter to ask when my order would be ready. A couple of minutes later, a strange guy, one of the servers, came over to my table with a tray. He apologized and just stood there, like he was expecting something from me. I asked him what he wanted, but he just kept staring at me with a weird, almost disgusted look. Finally, he turned around and walked away. I didn't think much of it at the time, but his face definitely stuck in my memory. I finished my meal and went to the next building. Half the workday was already over. A few hours later, I had only 2 more locations to visit. 2 small buildings where no one was waiting for me anymore. I had the keys, and the staff had already gone home for the day. It had gotten dark outside, and I should mention that I often walk through dark alleyways where there's even less light. That's how I shorten my route. It was in one of these alleyways that the first sign came, maybe a warning that I should stop walking there. I turned a corner and was walking between some buildings when I heard footsteps behind me. Someone was walking too. I didn't turn around, just kept going straight and then turned into a courtyard. The man turned after me. I started to get a little nervous because he was keeping pace with me. He wasn't trying to pass me, and he wasn't falling behind. I tried speeding up and slowing down, but he did the same. He followed me all the way to the building where I needed to pick up the documents. I went inside, hoping he would just walk past, and that's exactly what he did. I saw him walk past the door and continue down the street. Thank God. I really thought he was about to rob me. I grabbed the documents and decided to stay inside for a few minutes, just in case. After a short wait, I stepped outside again. I only had one last place left to go, and it wasn't far. I just kept walking straight, down a busy street. There were people around, traffic, lights. I had about 600 meters left to go, and then I was almost there. He was standing by the entrance, or at least, I wasn't completely sure it was the same man who had followed me earlier, but something deep down told me it was him. He was just standing there, looking in my direction. I had to finish my job, but I didn't want to get any closer to this guy, and I couldn't exactly call the cops. What would I even tell them? There's a man just standing outside a building? So I decided to approach him and ask what the deal was. I walked toward him, and at that moment, he turned and walked away. What the hell was wrong with this guy? What did he want from me? I went into the building and quickly collected the documents. I headed straight for the exit. Damn it, he was standing right outside the door. staring at me. I recognized him. It was the waiter from McDonald's. He was looking at me with a crazed expression and reached for the door handle. I grabbed it and started holding the door closed. "What the hell are you doing, man?" I shouted. He kept pushing against the door, and at some point, he started growling. Like, actually growling. He was strong, way stronger than me. But then, suddenly, he stopped. He stood there, looking down at his feet. And then, very slowly, he said,
"I'll find you."
Then he took off running. I still don't know what that was about, or what got into him. The next day, I went back to that McDonald's, but the guy wasn't there. I described him to the manager, but he said no one like that had ever worked there. He said he'd find me. It's been 2 years now, and I haven't seen him again. But I'm always watching my surroundings, and I never walk through dark alleys anymore.